Hello, all. This is Dr. Day Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3, and in this particular video, I want to talk to you about the chapters in a master's or a PhD thesis. So if you don't know me, I'm a associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out to get through graduate school that I wanted to pay the favor forward and help you out. All right, so what are the chapters of a master's and PhD thesis? So generally, there's two kind of styles in terms of a master's or a PhD thesis. So a master's thesis is generally some sort of large manuscript that you put it together. With a PhD thesis or a doctorate thesis, generally there's two main styles. One is sort of this large manuscript that you write, and it could be giant. Mine was like 300 pages. It was brutal. And then there's another kind where it is three essays that you put together, right? So the first essay, really well done, and it sort of depends on your field, but this is generally the way that I think is sort of the accepted norm. And I think it started in economics. They started doing this stuff, but so basically the first essay, it's already basically published or well on the way. Second essay is really well crafted. Third essay is kind of like, yeah, it's there, it's getting there, and they're sort of working on it. And that's kind of the style in terms of what's happening. And generally, you want to have three sort of coherent things when you're doing that. And with the different styles, there are slight differences, but the basic things that you want to cover, there's three basic things you want to cover with the chapters in your master's or PhD thesis. First one is some sort of introduction, front matter thing, and I'm including the theory that's in there, right? So it's basically this large section that you're just talking about why you're studying the thing that you want to study. And then the second section, sort of broad section, this is really broad. It's what you did. So, this is what we did. We went out and we surveyed this, or we went out and we dug a hole over here, whatever, like this is what you want to sort of put in there in terms of what you did. And then the last thing is sort of telling the audience, telling whoever that audience is, just telling them what you found, right? So it's just like sort of basic science stuff. And that's really what you're trying to do when you're accomplishing this. So I've seen a bunch of different theses and, did my own, all that kind of stuff. So that's the general pattern of it. So in the introduction, what you're trying to do with that, there's a couple of things that you want to make sure that you do. And this is just kind of rough in terms of helping you out. You want to make sure that you write why your thesis is interesting, or the thing that you're trying to study is interesting, right? So you need to get down into that. And there's some great, there's lots of different resources. Academy of Management, they had a couple of articles a few years ago about, what's interesting. They're always having stuff about interesting stuff. There's also the famous article by Davis, I think it was in 1971. Probably wrong with that, but and it's called "That's Interesting." You could check out what is interesting. What does that actually mean? And then the another thing that you need to sort of write down is the details of the theory of your thesis. So in the immediate introduction, which is going to be like, I don't know, 10, 15 pages, you have to sort of synthesize what you've done in the whole thing, right? But then right after that, following that, you have to write this theory section. So that's going to be like chapter 2, I guess, where you're going to go in and write the theory of the stuff that you're trying to do. And there's going to be sort of subsections of that theory section. So whether it's maybe you're looking at identity theory, maybe you're going to do organizational learning theory. That's kind of my area. And so you just write down sort of what's going on in the theory, right? Like why does it actually apply to your research question, the thing that you're trying to study? And then that's the sort of third thing that's really important, particularly in the introduction. So the immediate introduction is you want to get to the research question really quick. So maybe on like page 2 or 3, you specify the research question. You say, this is the thing that I'm trying to study. And you're going to really struggle at that research question. I can guarantee it. We all struggle at sort of forming this, and there's iterations that happen, right? So you might be like, Oh, why do managers, why do managers manage companies? That's kind of a terrible research question, but you might start drilling down, right? So after people start harassing you in terms of that, you might get into, okay, so maybe there's incentives and motives. So, and there might be differences between incentives and motives. Well, then you want to drill down into, okay, maybe there's differences in incentives of why they're trying to do this stuff. So maybe in terms of compensation, you might want to look at like wages versus stock grants, and maybe there's difference between those two, and you start breaking that down in terms of not just managing a company, big broad managing a company, but maybe it is implementing different R&D strategies. So maybe the different types of incentives that you have impacts different kinds of R&D strategies that you actually produce in a company. Right, so maybe if you do stock grants, maybe they're more likely to do radical R&D projects, right? I don't know. And so you want to look at a research question like that, right? Like, and I have some videos from a long time ago about research questions. You could look at those. And then what should you include in the sort of what you did section? Well, what you're trying to do in the what you did section. So I'm broadly going through this, right? So chapter 1 is going to be like, specifically the sort of overview of what you did in the whole thesis, and it's going to be like a little synopsis. Chapter 2, it's going to be like the theory of what you're trying to get into. Chapter 3 is where you start talking about like maybe it's your hypothesis too. Chapter 3 is like your hypothesis, which is like your theory building kind of stage, which is kind of in the introduction, sort of front matter-ish stuff. And then after that, you get into what you did, right? So this is, you actually are going into your research methodology after that, right? So you want to talk about what you're going to do in your research methodology, then get into your setting. There should be a section on your setting that's really important, and talk about that. And so actually, I take that back. In some fields, you can get away with not talking about your setting that much. It doesn't matter as much. But in other fields, in our field, in the field of like strategy, organizational theory and stuff, the setting is very, very important to talk about. You have to get into sort of the richness of what's going on. There's lots of just really cool things that happen. And so you want to get into that. Then you want to get into your analysis. So your analysis might include like the different kinds of regressions that you're going to do, or maybe it's qualitative stuff, the independent variables, dependent variables, variables of interest. You want to get into all that kind of stuff. And then after that, so immediately after describing that, you want to describe your data, right? Sort of have, and this is going to be in your results section where you describe your data, where you go into sort of, these are general trends that are happening in the data. These are these are the means and the averages and the standard deviations and all that kind of stuff. And then you get into your results, the immediate, like what you're trying to do. And that's where you're trying to, falsify some of your hypothesis, or falsify your hypothesis as much as you possibly can, and get into, whether they're supported and whatnot. And so that's going to be, 5 to 10 pages. And then finally, after that, in your results section, your results is usually really tiny. And then after that, you might have sort of post hoc where you're trying to, beat up those results and see if they hold under different conditions, and sort of discuss that kind of stuff. And then you get into the third section, which is, broadly what you found, right? So then you talk about what you found. So you go into the discussion, which is just talking about, this is what we found. And you want to explicitly say in that section, that your research question, we tried to pursue this research question and we found this, right? And then you get into the implications of your research. So you go into the different implications and talk about those different implications. So with the 3 essay style, so that's kind of the manuscript style. The 3 essay style is very, very similar, except for the 3 essays there's going to be like a front matter kind of the introduction kind of stuff where you're getting into all the overview of what's going on. And then the 3 essays are going to have independent sections like what you had done already, right? So there's going to be, its own theory section with its own research question. It's going to have its own method section and its own results. And then, so there's kind of a little gray area here. So you can either talk about your implications then for those specific essays right in there, or your manuscripts right after that. So it's like it's a coherent manuscript, or you can wait until the very end and put a bunch of implications for all the different things that you have done. And so you can even do sort of a hybrid. That's probably what I would recommend, sort of things that are specific to those manuscripts immediately right after that in that manuscript section. And then at the end, you have like 15 pages, 20 pages, 30 pages, whatever it is, of the implications and sort of discussion of the 3 things coherently all together. And you want to have a sort of a discussion of how they all fit together and why it makes sense that they all fit together. Right. So that's kind of what you're looking for in the chapters in a master's or a PhD thesis. So what I did in this video is I told you about the chapters in a PhD thesis or a master's thesis and sort of different kinds of styles, and broke it down into 2 different ways. And I went into the nitty gritties. You can go back and just rewatch the videos over again, and you might get a better idea of what I'm trying to say. You can also look in the show notes. I sort of have notes on this kind of stuff, so you can look at it as well if that's going to help you out. All right. Hopefully this helped you out with your question. Take care and have a wonderful day. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Take care. Bye.